hiding in the corner. George Paul's in there.
We ready?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to open with a statement, and then I'll take your questions. Charles, you're still here? Yeah. The people of Springfield are very happy. To begin, let me reiterate my pledge of several months ago that I will work cooperatively and professionally with Governor Rauner. Let me repeat, the number one problem facing Illinois today is the continuing budget deficit. My view is you cannot simply cut your way out of the deficit. There has to be a balanced approach of cuts and new revenue. The legislature has already adopted a bill that would cut the Medicaid spending by $400 million, in addition to cuts all over the spending plan that we sent to the governor. The spending plan that I support helps and protects middle-class families by supporting local schools, local police departments, local road programs. The governor has attempted to interject non-budget issues into the preparation of a spending plan. And my belief is that those non-budget issues go right to core beliefs of both Democrats and Republicans in the legislature, because those non-budget issues attempt to reduce wages and standard of living in middle-class families, and to force injured workers onto welfare and to the emergency room. Back to the budget deficit and the elimination of the budget deficit. The interjection of these non-budget issues into that work is functioning on the extreme. The solution to the budget deficit problem will be in moderation, not an extreme, and it requires that everybody be reasonable. Questions?
What's going on Tuesday?
Tuesday is a day that comes after Monday, and I think you'll be very happy to be here on Tuesday. I know I will.
I absolutely will, and I'll be happy to see you. What business do you expect to take place then when the House is here?
We haven't finalized that decision, but we'll let you know shortly.
There appears to be some difference between what the governor views as compromise and what you are offering as compromise.
Yeah.
Can you reconcile that some way? Because that seems to be at the core here.
I think it's a basic problem in terms of eliminating the budget deficit. Because to eliminate the budget deficit, we all have to function in moderation, not in the extreme. And the governor's the one who's attempting to interject these non-budget issues into the development of a spending plan and the elimination of the budget deficit. And his non-budget issues, in my view, are functioning in the extreme, not in moderation.
Given that he says that he won't back off on some of his agenda points and you call them extreme, should the state expect to operate without a budget after July?
I don't think the state should move into the month of July without the authority to spend money. Now, I had a meeting with the governor this morning. I made that point very emphatically. I explained to the governor that he's in charge of the executive department. Come July 1, he'll be expected to manage the executive department, and he will not have the authority to spend money on those executive agencies unless we finalize this work on the current spending plan and this work on the elimination of the deficit.
Can an agreement be reached between now and then?
If everybody is reasonable, an agreement can be reached. But reasonable means that you're functioning in moderation, not in the extreme.
What do you think of the cuts that he announced?
I offered him a critique today of those cuts. It was a very good critique and very critical of the claimed cuts, because many of those cuts had already been announced. Many were not from the general revenue fund, rather they were taken from other state funds. And I offered it to him in good faith and in continuation of my pledge to work with him cooperatively and professionally, and told him he might want to pass that along to his budget director.
Governor Rauner has been saying again and again this week that Democrats have not compromised on any issue. Do you
Well-
take offense to that?
I don't take offense to it, but
Or
I
do you
believe,
disagree with his
I
statement
believe
there?
that you listened to the debate this afternoon on the matter of workers' compensation. The House is sent to the Senate, a bill that deals with all of the points under consideration in workers' compensation. Not everybody agrees with the bill. We gave a lot of thought to the bill. We think it's comprehensive, well thought out. We think that it will go a long way toward improving the administration of the workers' compensation system and the delivery of benefits and services under that system to the injured workers. We're not interested in forcing injured workers onto welfare or into the emergency room.
Speaker, I noticed there was a lot of sports references today, so first off, as a Cubs fan, just wanna let you know, I voted for a few Sox players for the All-Stars this year, but more importantly, between you and the governor, it seems there's not a lot of give, not a lot of take from both of you. At some point, it's gonna be the people of Illinois who are gonna get caught in the middle of this. Are you concerned the longer this goes out, the longer you guys have this unreachable agreement, that the mess is only gonna get bigger?
I've said that from day one, and that's where I would say again, number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the current and continuing budget deficit. You cannot cut your way out of the deficit. You need a balanced approach, some cuts, some revenue, and you need people to be reasonable and to work in moderation, not in the extreme. The governor's the one who's interjected the non-budget issues. In my judgment, in the judgment of many people in the legislature, Democrats and Republicans, those non-budget issues are functioning in the extreme because they go to core beliefs of people elected to the legislature. People don't come to the legislature to reduce the standard of living of people that voted for them to come here. That's not why they come here. And to the extent that you're reducing wage levels, reducing the standard of living, you're functioning in the extreme. You're not functioning in moderation.
Should
When
the
you have-
governor drop all of those non-budgetary items?
I'm not going to tell the governor what he should drop, what he should attempt to advance. My focus is on the elimination of the budget deficit and a spending plan that helps and protects middle-class families by providing support to local school districts, so local districts can provide educational services, that provides support for local police departments, so they can patrol streets and protect people, and for local road programs, so that people can move around.
What is extreme about his workers' compensation proposal? What do you see as being extreme within that proposal specifically?
It's going to force workers to welfare and to the emergency room. The workers' compensation system is a no-fault system. It was first adopted for the benefit of employers, because employers did not want to be sued in the circuit courts for injuries that happen on the job. It's a no-fault system. In a no-fault system, you don't litigate fault. You simply litigate the extent of the injury and the extent of the benefits that are due to the worker. That's what happens in the system. Now, to the extent that you want to come in and change that system so that a person injured on the job is no longer eligible for workers' compensation, they're over in an emergency room or they're over in the Department of Public Aid, the majority of people in the legislature don't want to go in that direction. They view that as extreme.
What about revenue? What do you expect to get done between now and July 1st, including on trying to get maybe more than
Yeah.
233?
Yeah, well, as you know, the House is going to be in continuous session, and we're available 7 days a week to work on every problem facing the state of Illinois, including the new revenue that will be needed for both spending plans. So I've talked in terms of a spending plan that I support. I publicly acknowledge we don't have the money to pay for that spending plan. The governor has a spending plan that doesn't have enough money to be paid for, but they didn't publicly acknowledge that they didn't have the money to pay for it. Rather, they claimed that they were going to spend savings from an anticipated pension plan where the bill was never filed. So don't move away from that, dwell on that for a little while. The governor, pursuant to statute and mandate of statute, filed a budget plan. It's $2 billion in the hole. He didn't publicly acknowledge that he didn't have the money to pay for it. Rather, he said, well, we're going to adopt a new pension plan, and there'll be savings of over $2 billion from this pension plan, and then he never filed the bill.
People people I told at the Government Forecasting Accountability Office say that if you passed a 1% income tax hike on the spending plan that's currently you passed, it would mostly fill in that $3 billion. Is that the way you want to go with revenue, or?
All I've said is that we're prepared to work and negotiate with the governor to find money to eliminate the budget deficit. Again, eliminating the budget deficit, number one problem facing the state of Illinois, cannot be done by cuts alone. You need cuts and new revenue. I'm not hiding behind a budget plan that's going to spend anticipated pension savings. I'm telling you right now, this budget, in order to help and protect middle-class families by supporting local school districts, local police, local roads, needs new money.
And so what kind of revenue is?
I'm prepared to work with the governor and negotiate on what the elements would be on a tax bill.
Mr. Speaker, you said numerous times the governor needs to be reasonable. What does
E-
that mean?
Everybody needs to be reasonable, including me, and the Tribune editorial board.
First topic, prepare to
Speaker,
go around the
what
block.
do you think about the administration's response to Beth Purvis, the hearing this morning?
It's pretty limp, yeah. They ought to spend a little more time strategizing and thinking about things.
Well, the governor said plenty to say to us about Madigan and Cullerton enriched themselves off public service, et cetera. I think Sunday night he called it a family business that you folks have. What's he said to you about it, and how does that thread affect the process?
I think it's an example of functioning in the extreme. Doesn't help the process. Everybody should function in moderation and be reasonable. And we'll solve the biggest problem facing the state of Illinois, which is the budget deficit.
Well, what do you and the governor have to say about it when it's just the two of you?
We're very cordial to each other. No ill will, smiles, handshakes, exchange of ideas,
So,
pleasant, informative
Is an
meetings.
exchange of those ideas, when you guys meet, do you talk about those non-budget issues? Because he says he's
Sure.
not talking revenue
Yeah,
until you talk about those things, so.
No, this is the governor's document, and I put this in front of the governor this morning, and we talked about this document. And he's got a left column and a right column, and the left column are the non-budget issues. And we talked at length about the left column.
so these sound bites, or what we've heard from Rauner about Madigan is working for a political class, not the middle class, and he said that several times this week while you've been gone.
Right.
That doesn't offend you? That doesn't come up in your conversation with Bruce Rauner about, sort of the rhetoric that's been going on this last week?
It's all part of the process. Now, everybody, including the participants and the people of Illinois, would be better off without the political rhetoric, but it's part of the process. You just heard it on the floor a few minutes ago. I'm not going to engage in it. I'm simply going to focus on eliminating the budget deficit, the current one and the continuing one.
How are you preparing your caucus members if there is a government shutdown to deal with the public criticism that's going to continue coming up? And how do you, is that your fault, the governor's fault? How do you see that shaking out?
Well, I think that it won't happen if everybody's reasonable. I mean, there's no need for it. And there's plenty of history that it really doesn't serve any purpose, both here and in Washington, D.C. So if you just draw upon history and experience, everybody would be reasonable and function in moderation.
Thanks, everybody.
State plane, how did you get here?
So,
Curious if they were around.
I looked at the beautiful scenery along I-55, and the road was going up and down all the time and turning.
Goodbye. See you next week. Thanks, guys.
Are we still attempting 5 o'clock?
Wind up next to like
Sorry.
some part of the-